The stranger who knew my face. The acid rain of Helios 7 had a distinctive rhythm against metal, a sizzling percussion that marked the passage of time better than any clock. Thorne Valens had grown accustomed to it over his 15 years on this miserable mining colony, just as he'd grown accustomed to the perpetual ache in his left shoulder and the taste of synthetic coffee that somehow managed to be both bitter and bland simultaneously. Another glorious day in paradise, he muttered, kicking a malfunctioning stabilizer coil across his workshop floor. The coil skittered beneath a workbench with a metallic clang, joining the collection of parts he'd been meaning to organize for months. Outside, the downpour intensified. Helios 7's unique atmospheric composition turned ordinary precipitation into something caustic and vaguely iridescent, beautiful in the way dangerous things often are. Thorne watched through the dingy viewport as rivulets of burning rain carved temporary canyons down the corrugated metal exterior of his shop. Diagnostic complete, announced JN-10, his ancient utility droid. Fuel converter operating at 37% efficiency. Recommendation, replacement. Tell me something I don't know, Thorne replied, rubbing the stubble on his jaw. And tell the mining foreman he can pay his outstanding balance before requesting more miracles. The droid's optical sensors flickered, the mechanical equivalent of a sigh. Probability of payment, 23% and declining. Thorne was about to respond when a sound cut through the drumming rain, a sound that didn't belong. A thud against his outer door, followed by a weak scraping. He froze, listening. Helios 7 wasn't known for its wildlife, and the acid rain kept most humans indoors during a downpour. "Jayan, security scan," he ordered, reaching for the pulse wrench, not a proper weapon, but heavy enough to cause damage if needed. Detecting one life form. Humanoid. Biological readings, inconclusive. That wasn't reassuring. Inconclusive how? Parameters exceed baseline human metrics. Anomalous energy signature detected. Thorne approached the door cautiously, pulse wrench raised. In his experience, anything anomalous on Helios 7 usually meant trouble, smugglers, corporate spies, or worse. He pressed the door release and stepped back quickly. The door slid open with a hydraulic hiss, and Thorne stared at what appeared to be a sodden heap of luminescent fabric on his threshold. Then the heat moved. A hand emerged from the folds, slender, with elongated fingers that seemed to emit a faint glow beneath the skin. The fabric shifted again, and Thorne found himself looking into the most extraordinary eyes he'd ever seen, irises like liquid mercury, shifting and swirling with inner light. "Thorne," the stranger whispered, her voice melodic yet strained. "You're really here." He blinked in confusion. "Do I know you?" The stranger's face, unmistakably female but with features too perfect, too symmetrical to be human, crumpled in an expression of profound grief. Tears spilled from those impossible eyes, trailing down cheeks that shimmered with an inner bioluminescence. "You don't remember," she said, the words trailing off as she slumped forward. Thorne dropped the wrench and caught her reflexively. Despite her height, nearly matching his 6 feet, she weighed surprisingly little, as though her bones were hollow. Through the wet fabric of her cloak, he could feel that her body temperature ran several degrees hotter than human norm. "JN, lock the door," he ordered, carrying the unconscious stranger to the small cot in the back room where he occasionally crashed during lengthy repair jobs. As he laid her down, her hood fell back, revealing what had been partially hidden before, delicate, elongated ears that tapered to points, adorned with what appeared to be natural crystalline growths that caught the light. "Definitely not human," he murmured. "Correct," JN-10 confirmed, rolling up beside him. "No match in colonial registry. Possibility, illegal alien presence." "I gathered that much, thanks." Thorne carefully removed the soaked outer cloak, revealing a form-fitting bodysuit made of material he couldn't identify. It seemed to shift between solid and liquid states, adapting to her body's contours. Around her neck hung a pendant containing a crystal that pulsed with azure light, synchronized perfectly with what he assumed was her heartbeat. Something about it tugged at the edges of his mind, a half-remembered dream, perhaps, or déjà vu. How does she know my name? He wondered aloud, reaching tentatively toward the pendant. The moment his fingers made contact with the crystal, a jolt of energy surged through him. Thorn gasped as fragmented images flooded his consciousness, a sky of impossible colors, crystalline spires floating in midair, his own hands, manipulating energy fields he couldn't comprehend, and this woman, smiling at him with those mercury eyes filled with something more intimate than recognition. He jerked his hand away, breathing hard. What the hell was that? Gene's sensors whirred. Detecting neurological anomalies. Your brain activity has increased by 38%. Feels like someone just shuffled my brain, Thorn muttered, taking a step back from the cot. Keep monitoring her. Alert me when she wakes up. 3 hours later, Thorn sat at his workbench, dismantling a hydraulic coupling with more force than necessary. The rain had finally stopped, leaving behind the acrid smell of chemical dissolution that would linger for hours. He'd tried to focus on work, but his mind kept returning to the stranger and the disquieting vision he'd experienced. She's regaining consciousness, Jin announced. Thorn set down his tools and moved cautiously to the back room. The stranger was sitting up, her luminescent skin casting subtle patterns of light across the dingy walls. Her eyes found his immediately. Your beard is different, she said, her head tilting slightly. Shorter. And you have a scar here, she touched her own face above the right eyebrow, that you didn't have before. Thorn unconsciously rubbed the thin white line, a souvenir from a coolant pipe explosion 3 years ago. Before what? Look, I think you've confused me with someone else. I've never seen you before in my life. A sad smile played across her lips. That's what they wanted. The memory extraction was thorough. Memory extraction? He crossed his arms. Who are you? My name is Lyra. I am, she paused, seemingly searching for words. The closest translation would be Luminar. I come from beyond the veil. The veil? The dimensional boundary. What separates your reality from others? Thorn exhaled slowly. Right. So you're claiming to be from another dimension, and somehow we know each other? That's quite a story. Not a story. History. Our history. Lyra's mercury eyes seemed to look through him rather than at him. We met when you crossed into my world, accidentally at first. You were experimenting with quantum field manipulation. I'm a mechanic, Thorn countered. I fix broken mining equipment and the occasional atmospheric filter. I don't manipulate quantum fields. That's what they made you believe. Lyra stood, moving with fluid grace that made her seem as though she was partly floating. 5 cycles ago, what you would call years, you discovered how to pierce the veil. Your experiments created instabilities that threatened both our realities. Despite his skepticism, Thorn found himself transfixed by her voice, which seemed to resonate on multiple tones simultaneously, creating subtle harmonies with each word. I was sent to stop you, she continued. But instead. Instead what? He prompted when she faltered. Instead, we found that our energies were complementary. Together, we stabilized the rifts you had created. We saved countless lives across multiple realities. She stepped closer, the light beneath her skin pulsing more intensely. We became bonded. Bonded, Thorn repeated flatly. As in. In my world, it would be understood as a soul resonance. A permanent quantum entanglement between two beings. That sounds serious for someone I don't remember meeting. The Council of Luminars deemed our bond dangerous. Unprecedented. They feared what it might mean for the separation between worlds. Lyra's expression darkened. They extracted you from my reality and altered your memories. They placed you here, in this remote colony, with synthetic memories of a life you never truly lived. Thorn laughed, but the sound held no humor. So you're saying my entire life is a fabrication? My training as a mechanic? My memories of coming to Helios 7? Not entirely fabricated. They used fragments of your true past, reshaped to serve their purpose. And why should I believe any of this? Lyra reached for her pendant. Because of this. It contains a fragment of our shared consciousness, something they couldn't fully erase. She held it out to him. Touch it again, Thorn. Remember. He hesitated, recalling the disorienting flash of images from before. And if I don't want to? Then I have failed, she said simply. And the Shrouded will find us both. The Shrouded? The Council's enforcers. They've detected my crossing and will come to ensure the separation remains intact. Her expression grew urgent. They'll eliminate both of us if necessary. As if on cue, JN-10 rolled into the room, sensors flashing. Perimeter alert. Unregistered vessel approaching. Colonial registration codes invalid. Thorn felt a chill that had nothing to do with Helios 7's notoriously faulty environmental controls. How long? 8 minutes until projected landing. He looked at Lyra, at her otherworldly beauty and the absolute certainty in those mercury eyes. Either she was the most elaborate con artist he'd ever encountered, or... If, and that's a big if, what you're saying is true, what do you expect me to do? Come with me, she said, extending her hand. Return to where you belong. Where I belong, he echoed, feeling a strange resonance with the words. And where exactly is that? Beyond the veil. Where you once helped save a dying world. Where you were more than just a mechanic. Her lips curved in a smile that sent an unexpected pang through his chest. Where you were loved. Outside, the distant whine of engines grew louder. Thorn Valens, mechanic, exile, or perhaps something else entirely, stared at the outstretched hand of a woman from beyond reality, and made his choice. Echoes across dimensions. Thorn's worn cargo shuttle wasn't built for outrunning pursuers. It wheezed and shuddered as he pushed its ancient thrusters beyond recommended limits, the control panel flashing warnings he chose to ignore. They're still following, Lyra said, her mercury eyes fixed on the sensor display. 3 unidentified vessels maintained their distance, neither gaining nor falling behind, stalking rather than hunting. The Shrouded are patient. They have tracked me across 17 realities to find you. Lucky me, Thorn muttered, executing a sharp turn around Helios 7's smaller moon. The maneuver triggered another cascade of warning lights. This shuttle isn't going to last much longer at this pace. What exactly is your escape plan? Lyra removed the crystal pendant from her neck. In the confined space of the cockpit, its pulsing azure light cast otherworldly shadows across their faces. We need to create a temporary dimensional fold, a passage back to the Nexus. The Nexus being the place where realities converge. Where memory exists in its purest form. She placed the crystal into a small device she'd pulled from a hidden pocket in her bodysuit. Your original experiments pierced the veil there. Thorn frowned. And this crystal will somehow get us there? It contains the quantum signature of our bond. It will guide us home. Home. The word resonated strangely, like an echo from a place he'd never been. Or had he? Since their hasty departure from his workshop, leaving JN-10 behind with explicit instructions to deny everything, fragments of unfamiliar memories had been surfacing in Thorn's mind. Disjointed images, his hands manipulating energy fields, conversations in languages he shouldn't understand, the sensation of floating in a sea of light. I need you to drop out of standard space, Lyra instructed, interrupting his thoughts. Here. She indicated coordinates that corresponded with absolute emptiness, the vast void between Helios 7 system and the nearest neighboring star. There's nothing there, Thorn objected. Precisely. The absence of matter makes it easier to puncture the dimensional barrier. The proximity alert blared as one of the pursuing vessels accelerated toward them. "Well, they definitely don't like that idea," Thorne observed, engaging the shuttle's final thrust reserves. The ship groaned in protest. Lyra's fingers worked deftly across her device, which had expanded into a complex arrangement of crystalline components. "They know what we intend. The Shrouded will not permit us to reach the Nexus. Because I might remember who I really am?" Thorne asked, executing evasive maneuvers as the first energy pulse from their pursuers narrowly missed the shuttle's port side. "Because together, we represent a possibility they fear." Her eyes met his. The potential for worlds to merge rather than remain separate. Another energy pulse struck the shuttle's rear deflector. Systems failed in cascading sequence as Thorne fought to maintain control. "Whatever you're doing, do it faster," he urged. Lyra's device began emitting a high-pitched tone that seemed to vibrate through multiple dimensions at once. The crystal at its center glowed with increasing intensity. "I need you to fly directly toward that empty point," she instructed. Without hesitation. "Into nothingness." "Great plan." Despite his sarcasm, Thorne plotted the course. "Not nothingness," she corrected. "Everything." As they accelerated toward the designated coordinates, space itself seemed to ripple before them. Colors that had no right to exist in the vacuum appeared, swirling into a vortex of impossible light. The shuttle sensors went haywire, readings fluctuating wildly. "Hold your course." Lyra called over the cacophony of alarms. Another hit from behind. The shuttle's remaining shields collapsed. Thorne gripped the controls with white-knuckled determination, aiming directly for the center of the chromatic disturbance. "Whatever happens," Lyra said, her voice strangely calm, "remember that this isn't the first time you've crossed the veil." They hit the vortex at full speed. Reality fractured around them. For Thorne, it felt like his consciousness had been scattered across a million parallel thoughts, each existing independently yet somehow still connected. He was everywhere and nowhere, experiencing everything and nothing. Through the kaleidoscopic chaos, one constant remained, Lyra's hand gripping his, anchoring him to something solid. Then, abruptly, they were through. The shuttle materialized in a space that defied conventional description. They floated in a vast expanse where matter appeared to be optional rather than mandatory. Crystalline structures hung suspended in non-Euclidean arrangements. Light moved in visible currents rather than straight lines. In the distance, massive floating islands supported impossible architecture, buildings that seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. "The Nexus," Lyra said softly, her natural luminescence intensified in this environment. "We've made it." Thorne stared in speechless wonder. This place should have felt utterly alien, completely beyond his comprehension. Instead, an unsettling familiarity crept through him. "I've been here before," he whispered. "Yes. This was your laboratory." The shuttle drifted toward one of the floating islands, drawn by some unseen force. As they approached, Thorne could see a structure that resembled a cross between a temple and a scientific facility, constructed from materials that shifted like quicksilver. "Laboratory?" he questioned as they landed on a crystalline platform. "That implies I was some kind of scientist." "You were a boundary theorist," Lyra explained, deactivating her device. The crystal continued pulsing independently. "A human who discovered that reality is permeable. You developed technologies to explore dimensional thresholds." They exited the damaged shuttle. The air, if it could be called that, felt charged with potential, as though thoughts could materialize into physical form with sufficient concentration. "So I was essentially poking holes in the universe," Thorne concluded, following Lyra toward the temple laboratory. "That explains why your council wasn't thrilled with me. The council feared what they couldn't control. Your discoveries challenged their fundamental belief in separation as the natural order." Inside the structure, Thorne's sense of déjà vu intensified. Equipment that blended organic and technological components lined the walls. At the center stood a platform surrounded by arcing pillars of light, a dimensional gateway. "This is where it happened," Lyra said, her voice thick with emotion. "Where you first breached the veil accidentally. Where I was sent to stop you." Thorn approached the platform cautiously. As his hand passed through one of the light pillars, a surge of memory overwhelmed him. He stood before complex holographic equations, excitement building as the final variable fell into place. The gateway activated for the first time, tearing a hole in reality. Through it stepped a luminescent being of ethereal beauty, Lyra, looking shocked then furious as she realized what he'd done. "You've broken the fundamental laws," she accused. "I've proven they can be broken," he countered. The memory faded, leaving Thorn gasping. "I remember the first time I saw you," he said hoarsely. "You were angry." "I was terrified," Lyra corrected, joining him on the platform. "What you'd done was considered impossible. It threatened everything the Luminars believed about the structure of reality. But something changed." Lyra nodded, taking his hand and guiding it to the crystal. "Instead of sealing the breach, we discovered something unexpected. Our energetic signatures, what you might call souls, resonated at complementary frequencies. When his fingers touched the crystal this time, the memory that surfaced was more complete, more intense. Dimensional rift spreading uncontrollably across realities. Worlds bleeding into one another. Panic among the Council of Luminars. Then discovery, when Thorn and Lyra worked in tandem, their combined energy signatures could stabilize the breaches. Months of collaboration turned to friendship, then to something deeper. Nights spent beneath skies filled with impossible constellations. The gradual merging of two beings from separate realities into something new, something unprecedented. The Council's growing concern. Their final ultimatum, end the bond or face separation. "They can't understand what we've become," Lyra had whispered the night before they came for him. "Then we'll show them," he'd replied. "We'll prove that connection, not separation, is the true nature of the multiverse." But they never got the chance. Thorn staggered backward as the memory released him, his entire sense of self realigning around this new core of truth. "They took me," he said. "Extracted me from here and rewrote my memories. Made me believe I was just a mechanic on a backwater mining colony. They tried to erase what we discovered together," Lyra confirmed. "But the bond between us was too fundamental to completely sever. It left echoes, in your dreams, in your inexplicable knowledge of systems you'd never been trained on, in your longing for something you couldn't name." The dimensional gateway suddenly flared with energy. Lyra tensed. "They've found us. The shrouded have tracked our signature through the veil." Three shadowy figures began to materialize on the platform, humanoid in basic shape but composed of shifting darkness, as though they were made from the absence of light itself. Their features were obscured behind masks of polished obsidian. "Luminar Lyra," intoned the central figure, its voice resonating on multiple frequencies simultaneously. "You have violated the Council's decree. The human was separated for the preservation of dimensional stability." "The Council's decree was based on fear, not truth," Lyra countered, positioning herself protectively in front of Thorn. "Our bond doesn't threaten stability, it enhances it. That is not for you to determine." The shrouded figure extended a hand that elongated unnaturally, reaching for the crystal pendant. Thorn stepped forward, memories now fully integrated into his consciousness. He understood now, not just who he had been, but what he and Lyra had discovered together. "Actually," he said, "I believe I have some authority in this matter. This is my laboratory, after all." He reached out, not toward the shrouded but toward the gateway controls he now remembered intimately. With practiced movements that felt both foreign and natural, he manipulated the energy field surrounding them. "What are you doing?" demanded the shrouded. "Proving a point." Thorn locked eyes with Lyra, who understood immediately. She placed her hand over his on the controls, their energies merging as naturally as breathing. The gateway pulsed, expanding outward in concentric rings of light that encompassed the entire chamber. Where the light touched the shrouded, their shadowy forms wavered and destabilized. This is what the council feared, Thorn explained, feeling the power of their combined energies flowing through the system. Not that we would destroy the barriers between worlds, but that we would prove those barriers are illusions. That connection, not separation, is the fundamental nature of existence. The light intensified, revealing the true nature of the nexus, not as a point where realities converged, but as the underlying fabric from which all realities emerged. The shrouded began to dissipate, unable to maintain their form in the presence of such unified energy. The council will not permit this, warned the lead figure as it faded. The council will adapt, Lyra replied, or it will become irrelevant. As the light reached its zenith, the laboratory transformed around them, responding to their combined intent. The gateway expanded into a monitoring array showing countless realities simultaneously, all accessible, all connected through the underlying fabric they now controlled. When the light finally subsided, they stood alone in a transformed space, their space, with the infinite possibilities of the multiverse spread before them. Thorn turned to Lyra, seeing her fully now with both his original memories and those of his time on Helios 7. 2 lives, 2 perspectives, merging into a more complete whole. So, he said with a grin that bridged both identities, I suppose I'm not just a mechanic after all. Lyra's mercury eyes sparkled with relief and joy. You never were. Though I must admit, those skills might prove useful in maintaining a dimensional laboratory. And the council? The shrouded? They'll return eventually, she acknowledged. But they'll find us stronger, with evidence they cannot ignore. What we've discovered changes everything they believe about the structure of reality. Thorn looked out at the multiverse displayed before them, infinite worlds, infinite possibilities. Among them, he spotted Helios 7, the mining colony that had been his prison and yet had also shaped part of who he now was. Do you regret it? He asked suddenly. Coming to find me? Risking everything? Lyra's luminescence pulsed in time with his heartbeat, their quantum entanglement made visible. Some bonds transcend dimensional barriers, she said simply. Ours always will. Thorn Valens, mechanic, scientist, dimensional pioneer, took her hand as they faced the infinite together. No longer strangers across realities, but partners in a journey that would reshape the very fabric of existence. Behind them, the crystal pulsed with their unified energy, a beacon illuminating countless possible futures, all connected, all part of a greater whole.